Members and officers to the Prosperous Communities Overview and Scrutinies meeting. As a council, we welcome the use of Welsh language within our public meetings, but I confirm that I have not received any request to use Welsh today. Therefore, the meeting will be conducted in English only. May I remind you that this meeting is being webcast, therefore can I ask that you turn off your mobile phones and ensure you speak clearly into your microphones. For information, in case of a fire drill, please follow the sign to exit the building. And can I remind all members to sign the attendance register and any declarations of interest on the form available. Please can I ask now, Chris, are there any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillor Stuart Ashley and Veronica Crick.
Are any members have any declarations? Please declare them now. Okay. Right, just to remind members, the minutes relate to the meeting we held on the 26th of June 2019. We had to scrutinise the updates and recommendations made at the previous scrutiny meeting, and also an update on the WAO actions relating to community safety. Please can I ask everybody to scan through the minutes for accuracy and confirm that these are an accurate count of the meeting that day.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody happy? Yeah. Right, so we're on page 16. Excuse me. Adult Learning Funding Model. The purpose of the report is to provide members of the Prosperous Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee with an overview to the funding models for adult community learning in Torfaen, how that funding has changed over time, how the priorities are set and have changed over that period of time, and how the service is performing in its delivery of the priorities. May I take the opportunity, you can be with me, Councillor Jones has just come to the meeting. No problem, Neil, thank you. Can you be with us in a minute? We need to get settled. Okay, Neil? Okay. Right. Unfortunately, Rachel Jowett is not with us this morning, so can I invite Dave Leach, the Head of Economy and Skills, and Angela Price, the Employment and Adult Learning Manager, to the meeting, and ask you both if you can give us a brief overview of the main points in the report. So I'll hand you over to Dave, please.
No problem at all. So, as you've set out, what we're aiming to do here is give mainly a review of the funding models that ACL is based on, and the priorities that ACL is able to deliver within that funding model, and how those priorities are set to give it an understanding of how the service works. In terms of the main priorities within the report, the main issues in the report, we set out in section 1 just some of the basics around how that service works, so where it's delivered from, mainly from the settlement, the power station and Crosskeeliog Community Education Centre. There is some outreach activity then, particularly through the family learning element of the service. We then go on to explain how the service is funded, which is through a combination of different funding streams. So it receives some funding through Coleg Gwent's franchise, which essentially we're part of a broad network of local authorities and organisations across Gwent who work with the college to be able to deliver some of that adult community learning provision. It receives funding through Welsh Government through a direct delivery grant, which is essentially to provide essential skills. I'll talk about that briefly in a second. It receives support from the local authority, and it receives income from fee charging activities, room hire, that element as well. We then go on to set out some of the changes that have happened in terms of funding, and that's dotted throughout the report. And then explain the curriculum areas. And there's two real focal points for the curriculum, if you like, and different funding streams contribute to different elements of that. There's the skills for work, essential skills, if you like, A lot of that relates to application of number, digital literacy. It relates to some of our communication skills elements as well. So that's a real focal point for that element of the curriculum. And then we've got skills for lifestyle and leisure. Now these are the what we call the full cost curriculum, if you like. It's ones that learners will pay a contribution towards. That's areas like modern languages, cookery, and a whole host of other courses that we can talk about in a bit more detail later on. So we've set out then how those different curriculums operate and some of the constraints that we have to operate under in terms of the funding models for them. When we get given funding for these, we're also given quite clear parameters as to what the priorities are that we can deliver within each of those, and we've set that out within the report. We've also then given a bit of an understanding of how we actually undertake the prioritisation of different courses. So what's the process that the team goes through at the start of the year to build the curriculum and then adjust it as they go through the year depending on changes in demand. And the key elements there are around the tutors that we've got available, the likely demand out within the community, the premises that we've got available, and those constraints that funders put on us. And all of that comes together into a single package then, in terms of when we build the curriculum. And as I say, we do have the flexibility and we do review that then throughout the year depending on any changes in demand. Report then moves on to set out the income and expenditure in a bit more detail, so the actual financials of what the breakdown is between those different funders. That's set out in section 2.6 of the report. And that continues then with a bit more detail on each individual funder and how those funding mechanisms work through 2.7 to 2.10. And then finally, we set out some of the performance elements for the service over the last 12 months. This is based on our performance monitoring that we do, and it's based on the outcomes and achievements that the service area is trying to deliver. We've purposely tried to gear up that service area to deliver against corporate plan priorities around education and around supporting vulnerable people as well. So a lot of the measures that you'll see there are ones that we've tried to align against those priorities. And then finally, the report sets out some of the changes that we think might be on the horizon in terms of funding and policy changes for ACL. The main one of which is potential changes to the way that Welsh Government delivered their block grant that comes to the local authorities, the direct delivery grant, as we call it in here. They have issued a consultation and have now confirmed that they're likely to move to a national body for adult and community learning. So they're working through the funding mechanisms of that at the minute. We're told at the minute that this is likely to be a multiple year transition, so we're not looking really at any major changes for 4 to 5 years. We wouldn't have thought in that, but we need to start preparing for it now. So some of the key things just to draw to your attention from this report relating to that are around how the service will be funded when that change happens, but also whether there are opportunities there, whether it may be delivered through a franchise model, for example, like the Coleg Gwent one. So there may be opportunities to bring in additional resources through that. And there's no expectation at this stage that anyone who comes in to deliver that will have all of the infrastructure that they need without the local authority support. So they wouldn't necessarily, for example, have venues that they can deliver their services from. So it's likely that there's still going to need to be some form of budget allocation from whoever that body is to the local authority as well. That was the main funding change, and then the last area that we moved on to then is about where we'd like to go with the lifestyle and leisure courses and how we'd like to be able to expand that curriculum. To do so, we probably need to start looking at the feasibility of moving some delivery out into the community, so out into other venues beyond the ACL supported venues that we've currently got. And the implications of doing that in terms of the finances. So that's, in a nutshell, a summary of the report.
Add anything?
A really good year for us in terms of adult and community learning, and I'm really pleased that we've been able to bring our findings to you in terms of ACL and the way that the service is moved, and for you to see that the priority settings that we have to go through, and also the breadth of our provision as well, I think has increased. We do a lot to support vulnerable adults within the community in terms of they're essential skills, but then we're also here to support the older generation in terms of the provision that we provide to the community for people that are the older generation experiencing social isolation, and they use that through the facility of adult community learning. So yeah, I'm really pleased that we can talk to you in a lot more depth today, hopefully, about ACL and how we want to take the service forward, because I think it's a really integral part of what the council offer.
Thank you. This is something that we're glad that you're bringing towards us, because obviously we've had discussions and it'll relate in some of the questions we're going to put forward to you, if that's okay. Okay. Question number 1 is my question, and it's relating to paragraph 1.4. Split financial years. What challenges for planning budget and activity does this create, and how do you overcome the challenges that lie ahead?
So one of the main challenges is that our franchise amounts and our Welsh Government amounts vary year on year. So when we have to set a budget at the start of a financial year, we don't know the exact amount of settlement that we're likely to get the following academic year, which is the second half of the financial year. But we do have a reasonably good indication, and we have that because we know what we've been given the previous year, and we can see any trends that have emerged. And in the past, we haven't seen, other than one fairly substantial change quite a few years ago where they changed the focal point of what the curriculum was about, we haven't seen major variations in the franchise amount. Small changes, but nothing major. The other element that gives us a degree of control is that it's part of a bidding process. So we will essentially set out to Coleg Gwent and to Welsh Government what we feel we can deliver for the amount of money that they're looking to give us. So we know that when we put that proposal in, it's something that we can actually cost. So it makes it difficult in terms of budget managing at the start of the year, but there's processes in place now which we're fairly confident are robust around how we actually manage that split over the 2 financial years. Where it becomes more difficult is if there are any major changes to a franchise or to a direct award, because that would then make it more difficult. So say one of those were to be removed entirely, it would make it more difficult from a budget planning perspective. And that's why the priority for us, and certainly for my role, is being in constant liaison with Welsh Government, with Coleg Gwent, to try and make sure that they give us the most notice that they can about any changes that are coming on the horizon. Because if we've got time to plan, then we're able to put mitigations in place.
Looking on page 12 with the Welsh Government allocation, particularly for 2017 to 2019, I mean the increase from that first year to the second year is only £800, right? So, I mean, in austerity, that's not a lot if things are increasing in cost. But also on the franchise allocation, there's a big leap between that first figure and the second figure. It's like £10,400. You know, that's what I'm trying to say. The Welsh Government are giving you £800 increase. Yeah, you're having to look to find £10,400 to provide that service.
The amounts that each organisation gives us aren't linked necessarily, so they come from completely different funding streams. So the franchise comes from a different one to Welsh Government's delivery grant. The Welsh Government element is a significantly smaller element of what we give, so we'd expect any changes to be smaller within that. But you're right, the changes to the franchise are the ones that we're really keen to watch, because any major changes to the franchise are the ones that will hit us proportionately harder. We've been fortunate that because of the way that we've designed the service, and we've started to look to expand the service in terms of some of the essential skills provision, we've seen actually increases in the amount that the franchise that we've had over the years. And we're hopeful that trend of increasing franchise will continue. As long as Coleg Gwent still get the same or a higher allocation from Welsh Government, we're confident that we're in as good a position as we can possibly be to get more franchise coming out. So what we're hoping for is that if that happens, we'll be able to see more services put in rather than less.
Okay, everyone said.
My question is, the relevant paragraph is 1.5. Will the development of the new sixth form have an impact on the ACL, and if so, what?
That's a really good question. In terms of the way that we've delivered ACL, we've tended to focus on it as a different branch to education, to traditional school post-16 education. So we've tended to focus on it as a community learning offer. That's certainly the direction that we want to continue to take this in. So certainly if we take the leisure lifestyle curriculum for a start, I don't see any issues between those two at all. The types of courses that ACL offer wouldn't contradict with the sixth form provision at all. When you look at essential skills, I think, and Ange can come in here as well, but I think we're targeting a different audience than the sixth form would be targeting on that, in that we're trying to reintroduce people back into the workforce at a later age. And a lot of the essential skills provision, what we've increasingly come to do is use the lifestyle and leisure courses as a hook to get people back interested in learning, and hopefully then see them progress onto some of the essential skills courses too. So whilst the sixth one will still be delivering essential skills and that element of it, I think they're targeting a different audience to us. It's something that we'll need to be mindful of in terms of the risks going forward for our budget profile, and we will take that into consideration, but I think it's a different audience.
You want to come back in?
Yeah.
To do it.
I think there will definitely be some duplication in terms of our provision because they will be offering essential skills as well. But I think what Dave said is key. We're targeting learners who have potentially not succeeded in that environment and are actually put off by going to that kind of establishment. So we're targeting the older generation, I think, who wouldn't necessarily go to college. We do have some learners who are aged 16 to 24 come to us for our GCSE provision, but I would say the majority of our essential skills learners are older who haven't succeeded in that environment, that school environment, that college environment. So I do think there will be duplication, definitely, but I wouldn't necessarily see it as a risk for us in adult community learning because we are definitely targeting different demographics,
But certainly on that GCSE element, though, there's a conversation that we can have with the education department around that.
Anybody else like to make any comment? Neil? Move on to the next question, please, which is going to be brought by Sue.
Thank you, Chair. If we go to 1.6, you briefly spoke with Steve on the subject. With the franchise allocation was particularly halved in 2015-16, why was this and what impact did it have?
This was related to a major change in terms of policy priorities, where in the past the franchise allocation had been less constrained in terms of what it could contribute to. So the franchise allocation used to be able to contribute to things like modern languages, cookery courses, that type of thing. There was a change in, I believe, Welsh Government policy, which then focused their adult community learning budgets more on essential skills. And so there was a significant then drop in the amount of budget that they were willing to allocate because they removed that big part of the curriculum away. In terms of what impact that had, that coincided with a service review essentially where we looked at what it was that we were able to deliver with the updated funding settlement that we had. And I think over the years, and not necessarily just in that year, but over that rough period of time, there were some fairly substantial changes in terms of the management structure of ACL. And that's where the focus was in terms of making reductions to be able to meet that. The other element that was key is that as part of that same Welsh Government policy, there's an expectation that for lifestyle and leisure courses, learners contribute towards their own learning. So this is the elements like pottery, modern languages. So we moved over to an income charging model for more of the courses then at that point. So whilst the franchise element went down considerably, the income element went up. And that was part of what a Welsh Government policy driver there as well. So those were the main changes, and that's how we controlled it in terms of how we deliver the service.
Do you want to come back in?
There was a service review. With this review, with the management structure, was that management leaving the posts?
The number of management posts in the structure were reduced.
Also, because the curriculum back then was so large, because of the amount of franchise that we used to have curriculum leads, curriculum specialists as well. So we used to have IT curriculum specialists and lead officers. And because the franchise was reduced massively, those posts also went as well. So there was a reduction in management and reduction in other key posts within the ACL structure, which no longer exists because the curriculum wasn't there.
Neil, did you want to come in, please?
Yes, good morning. Again, just looking at this budget cut in 2014-15, I've got two questions actually, depending on your answer to the first one. Did you have any notice, or how much notice did you have in the reduction? If you want to just go through it.
Yeah, we did have some notice, obviously, because the cuts were coming. We knew that there was going to be a significant cut, hence why there had to be an ACL review that was brought to members and to Cabinet at the time. Yeah, how much notice, I couldn't actually tell you, but we would have had some notice and some consultation with Welsh Government and with the college as well, in terms of their franchise priorities. Yes.
And bearing that in mind, Welsh Government are renowned for changing goalposts. Do you put planning in place just in case there should be another review in the future? Have you got contingency plans to make sure that you're aware of your funding streams and the likely impact, if there are any changes to it?
We've been working over a number of years to try and increase the amount of earned income that we get as a service. So one of the questions that's presented in this report is around the lifestyle and leisure element of the curriculum and whether there's opportunities to expand that. And with that comes increased budget to be able to deliver it. So we are trying to reduce the reliance that we have on those elements. But it would be naive of me to say that we're not still reliant at the minute on having an allocation from our franchise and from Welsh Government to deliver essential skills. Where we are in terms of planning for that at the minute, the Welsh Government direct grant element, we're working through some contingency plans with them at present. As I tried to set out at the start, we don't feel that any alternative provider is going to be able to deliver that service without venues. So we believe that there will still be some sort of income allocation. And what we're trying to do is offset any reductions, so scenario plan for various reductions, looking at the full cost curriculum that we can provide. The franchise is a more difficult element to mitigate because it's such a large part of the budget. We have started to look at how we design the curriculum, but it is in its very early days if there was a reduction in the franchise.
I apologise, Nick, I called you Neil, so I do apologise. Move on to question 4, which is going to be raised by Councillor Fay Jones.
Hi. I just want to bring your attention to 1.10, and it moves on nicely from what we've been discussing. Reduction of 5 members of staff to 2, which are members of the ACL management team. What impact did this have? That's the first part of my question. And the second part is, full-time ACL manager has since retired, with duties transferring to council and employability manager. Again, what impact did this have? And have there been any issues? I'm sure there must have been.
We have actually looked at the impact that it's had, and the key focus for us was the impact that it would have on service provision. From a service provision perspective, the structures would change. So whilst posts were deleted, the responsibilities were then put into a curriculum lead role, if you like. And we've managed to deliver that new structure without the impact on service provision. It may sound a bit as if we're exaggerating, but we believe that the impact on morale has been reasonably positive as well, because although we've taken management posts out of the structure, it's actually enabled us to empower some of the staff who were previously working on administrative roles to be able to take on some of those responsibilities. So as a team as a whole, people have actually completely embraced it since that 2014-15 date. I think, and Ange can give more details on this, it was probably safe to say there were teething problems at the start, but that new structure is now bedded in and working very efficiently. And just to build on that, the combination with the employability manager role has been a sort of natural lead-in for us, because that employability work that we do, a big element of it is focused around, all right, a different clientele, but focused around essential skills and getting people back into the workforce. And so there were natural synergies between those two functions anyway. The risk for us is a lot of our employability provision is externally funded, and so there may have to be other changes depending on what happens to our employability provision. But the synergies are there in terms of ACL and employability.
And I think when the previous manager retired and I was asked to take on the role of adult and community learning, I won't lie, it was a bit of a shock. You know, it's a very big service area, so is employability as well. But we get, through the European projects, a lot of our match funding comes from adult and community learning, and we are supporting the same clients, the same, you know, residents of Torvine. So we have had our issues, I'm not going to lie, and I'd be silly to sit here and say we haven't, it's all been plain sailing. You know, there have been times where it has been quite fraught, but we've come out the other end. Our curriculum is very, very strong, I feel, at the moment. I think the way that we're going, the direction in which adult and community learning is going, is good. Our curriculum is quite diverse now. We're listening to our learners. We do a lot more marketing now than we used to previously. We're out in the community. We want adult and community learning to be the first choice of learning for people in Torvine. We're listening to our residents as well if they tell us that they want extra courses within the community. As long as we've got the venues, and you know, we'll take digital learning and we'll take things into Blenavon like we have in terms of the full cost side of it as well. So yeah, I think the way that we've got a vision for adult and community learning is for it to be in every community that we can take the service into. Yeah.
Just wanted to come back on that. I think it's great that, you know, the team has really responded positively to these changes. Does the pay reflect the extra responsibility that those extra team members now have to shoulder?
It does, yes. Recently we've had, just to give you a bit of history with how this has all come about, we lost a key member of our team recently. We've got another post, and within adult and community learning, I think we've tried to recruit to that post twice in the past, and the people haven't had the expertise, they haven't had the knowledge or the rate in which we work at within adult and community as well. We've got to be very, very reactive, juggling lots of balls in the air. And I made a decision myself to not go out and recruit to that management post, but actually to create a lower grade post and offer it to the ABS staff that have worked within ACL for many, many years. And I'm very, very thankful to say that one of them did apply and is now part of our management team. And so it has been a progression for them, but we're doing things differently with adult and community learning. We're not just replacing posts for post's sake. It's obviously a cost saving as well for the budget. But yeah, that person has come into post. It's been a really good addition to the structure, thankfully, and I'm hoping that post will continue. Yeah.
And all of the posts that we do are job evaluated, so what's happened with them is some of the responsibilities that may not be appropriate for that grade will have passed up to either Angela or myself.
I'm glad to see that there's internal promotion within the team, and I think it encourages your staff, that there is a way forward for them.
Yeah.
Thank you. Going to
mine's on paragraph 2, 1.2. How often do you carry out these marketing exercises, and when during the year? That's the first part of the question. And do you record how many people enter the ACL from these avenues to assess the value of these advertising exercises?
Yeah, okay, touched on briefly, marketing is something that we needed to do more of, and I'm thankful to say we have got somebody within the service. We match fund a post from adult community learning, and so we've got somebody who's designated now to take on the lead of marketing. So we've got a marketing calendar that we work towards, so any big community events, that like the big event in Cwmbran, Pontypool in the park, that kind of thing, we're always there. But then we're also in the leisure centres on a weekly basis. We're in Cumberland Town Centre, we do a lot in the library, so we're very, very good now at doing a lot of assertive outreach. One thing we haven't been so good at in the past is probably measuring the success of all of those. So, as you know, one of these is produced and we send this to every home in Torfaen, which has happened historically for years. But what we're trying to do now is to measure where our service users come from. Is it because of the brochure? Is it because we've done a massive increase of our social media platform? We do a lot with corporate and do like a takeover Torfaen's page, so that we're responding there and then to people's questions. So yeah, I say we're very, very good now at marketing. We could probably do a lot more. We do a lot more on social media, but then we know that not everybody is on social media. Not everybody goes onto Facebook. So that's why we try and get out into more that we can do into the local communities. But yeah, we can always be better at it, but we do need to be better at where our successes are from. Yeah, and we've changed that this year. It's on our enrolment form this year for adult and community learning, so we can find out where people are coming from. And it's also, so we record that on our database, so this time next year I'll be able to confidently say 60% came from the brochure, 30% came from here, but we're not at that place yet, but we will be next year. Yeah. Anybody want to give it? Fee.
Would it be possible to do a survey at the end of every course or every learning, with the learners, and then collate that, whether it's on the computer or whether they're given forms, like a survey monkey or something?
Yeah, we do that anyway. As part of all of our courses, we've got end of course questionnaires. We also take feedback from the tutors as well. Twice a year we've got a learner involvement strategy where we invite every learner across the 3 centres to come and talk to myself as the ACL manager and representatives from Coleg Gwent, to find out if there's any problems, but hopefully those we find out about those rather than waiting. But we also do a lot of market research as well to find out if there's other things we should be doing in the community. But yeah, at the end of every course, and I'm happy to share those results with you, the college collate all of our learner questionnaires, so we can see, we ask them things like how good their course was, how their enrolment was, did they enjoy the centre, and is there anything that we can do to progress or enhance their learning. So that is something that we do very, very well at the moment, yeah.
Ask them on there where they heard about the course from?
As I just said, we do, but we need to be better at it. Yeah, so this year I've asked for it to be included on our enrolment form. So every learner in every class has to complete an enrolment form, which we process. And now we've asked actually on there, tell us where you heard about us. So is it from the brochure? Is it from social media? So this time next year, we'll be able to confidently know where our learners are coming from, but also highlight any gaps of where we're not, and the people that we're not reaching as well.
It's quite an important part for us as well in terms of designing the curriculum. Our learner engagement has really gone up in terms of their involvement in designing the curriculum. So we're constantly asking learners what courses they want to see, and that helps us and it helps the curriculum leads to be a bit more innovative. So it helps us to trial courses, and we do a lot of that through sort of Saturday trialling. It helps us to trial courses that we may not naturally have thought would work as officers, but we feel that there's learner demand coming for them, so we see whether they work, and that's a big part of our market research and intelligence gathering as well.
Very proactive.
Now going on to question 6, which I...
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. The first one, health and social care. Do we work in collaboration with the local health board? And second question, are there any projects or funding streams through the health avenue that the ACL could tap into?
Yes, the health and social care element of it has changed quite considerably this year in terms of the qualification for health and social care. And there's been a working group set up to look at all parties coming together to design and plan out who's going to deliver that curriculum. So I believe the health board are represented on that, as are social services within the council, as are our other training elements within the council as well, so Torfaen training in terms of their apprenticeship delivery too. So it's been a really good example of different service providers coming together with service users to design and plot out how that curriculum's actually delivered. In terms of funding streams, is something that we're shortly going to be exploring, whether there's any funding streams coming from the Health Board that could support growth in that. It is a regional skills partnership priority, health and social care. It's wrapped up as part of the human foundational economy element that they're looking to deliver. And we're starting to see that come through now in other funding streams. So, for example, our apprenticeship contract that we get awarded to Torvine Training, a big element of that contract there is ring-fence for health and social care delivery of this new qualification. So we know that it's been pushed as a regional priority. We know that there's money coming down to deliver that. In terms of the adult and community learning element of the delivery of that, that's the conversation we need to have with the Health Board. We haven't started that conversation yet, but we will be.
Anybody else want to come in on that? We now move on to question 7. I can ask Nick to come in on that.
Yes, thank you. Moving on to 2.3.1, the curriculum priority skills for lifestyle and leisure. In there, we're actually doing a full cost recovery on that. Do we actually have any provision for discounts for particular groups, maybe the elderly or the people on low incomes and that type of thing?
Not for the full cost curriculum, there isn't, no. The things like modern foreign languages and the cookery courses, those costs have to be met by the cost of the learner. Currently it's £4.25 per hour.
Have we explored maybe talking with some local companies to see if they would like to maybe help with funding, particularly thinking of that type of thing, some of their social responsibilities?
It's something that we'd be keen to do. We haven't engaged with companies on that sense before. We've tended to focus our skills engagement with companies around the apprenticeships and the work that we're doing on apprenticeships, because there's an expectation there they're contributing to the cost of the apprenticeship through the payment of the wage. From an adult community learning side, no, we haven't, but it is something that we could quite happily do.
I think that might be quite important because obviously the benefit to them is that if they have a more highly skilled workforce, not only in sort of some of the specific things, but in some of the social skills, that you're going to get a far more well-rounded employee. So I think it might be worth talking to them, because I think they might be quite keen.
Steve, I just want to come in on anything on that? Okay, moving forward, we'll go on to question 8, and question 9, both by Steve.
One it seems, isn't it? Paragraph 2.41 and 2.46, the second question. The Skills Development Fund, are we confident we're providing training for the right skills? And are these jobs in the local area needing these skills that we're offering? And the second part of that is, what difficulties do we face due to the timing of the Welsh Grant allocation announcements, which you probably covered all?
In terms of the first part of that question, this year we've done a lot of locally based research with our companies. We now have a strategic economic forum, which is some of our bigger businesses, and we've done a lot of engagement work with that forum around what they believe the skills gaps are. And we've actually done a lot of statistical research to present to that forum that shows where those skills gaps are on a specifically Torvine-based footprint. And we know that one of the big areas where we're strong in terms of our local economy is health and social care, and another area is manufacturing. And a third area, particularly in the South Cumbrian, is IT and digital. We also know there's quite a big public administration element to our economy. So the Skills Development Fund, we've tried to gear it to those local priorities within the constraints that we've got from the Regional Skills Partnership around what the regional priorities are. Now, we're quite fortunate that actually our local priorities align very well with the Regional Skills Partnership priorities, particularly around human foundational economy, which is the sort of teach training element, the health and social care element, and around manufacturing and around IT. Those are 3 areas where there's really, really close alignment. So we've designed the Skills Development Fund curriculum to be able to address some of those areas, which is why we've got the focus on IT, ready to raise the aspirations and the skills levels of some of our workforce to be able to look at entry-level IT jobs. And that's been a big part of the logic around the IT element there. And the supporting teaching and learning is obviously around that public administration element. Where we would like to have gone and where we'd like to go with Skills Development Fund is targeting those other areas, so health and social care and manufacturing. The reason that we weren't able to do it this year is that as a centre we're not accredited to deliver courses in those, and because of the timescale constraints this year we've not been able to secure accreditation. And also we think we need a more detailed discussion with our manufacturing businesses about what classroom-based work they want to see, because a lot of the focus for them is around apprenticeships and having somebody hands-on within the firm being able to deliver. For them to release staff on work time to come to classroom-based work would be challenging. So if they're going to support manufacturing through an ACL route, we need to understand exactly what it is that they're looking to achieve from it from a skills perspective. And so for next year's programme, we're hoping that we'll be in a better position to understand that and design a curriculum around it. But we felt that this year we weren't in that place where we want to be around manufacturing, which is why that element of it's not been integrated. And I hope actually that also addresses the issue around the impact of any delays, is that it's caused us a constraint in terms of our ability to get centre accreditation for these other courses, for manufacturing and for health and social care.
If I just give you an example of how we're trying to link ACL and the SDF priorities with employability, the people that we've supported to do the IT, which is why we've put the IT courses on, we've been linking with SRS. We had a jobs fair this week where SRS were there, so the people that are actually on these classes, we're trying to link them to the vacancies that SRS have got, either because they're working and we can upskill them so they can earn a better wage, or the people that access those courses are unemployed, to link them to work placements within SRS to utilise those skills. So that's just an example of how the two kind of marry.
Part of that question, please, calm down. Another part of that question is if we need to change the skills because the manufacturers come in, how quick can we move to address that?
It depends what skills the manufacturers are looking for. So the key for us is to go and speak to that manufacturer, and this is what the business support team will do whenever we get a manufacturer coming in. We'll then talk through what their skills needs are, and we'll then assess, is that apprenticeship, is it higher level skills? Is it something that ACL can pick up around some of the skills that we're talking about here, the essential skills? Or is it an employability or pre-employment function that they need people to be work ready by the time that they take them on? So we'll understand from that manufacturer exactly what that skills need is. And then for us, it's a case of going and speaking to each of the providers of those different parts of the service. For apprenticeships, Colleague Gwent are able to deliver apprenticeships in a lot of these areas, so the courses and the accreditation frameworks are there for that. So it's quite a quick conversation that we can facilitate between those two. On the higher education side, we've done a lot of work recently to try and explain to our manufacturers what's out there in terms of schemes like University of South Wales Network 75, which is a sort of advanced apprenticeship scheme, if you like. It's a higher education qualification, but where people are placed into industry on a formal basis as part of it. So again, we can offer that straight away to a manufacturer who comes in. On the pre-employment side, our employability programmes are very responsive because they're up and running at the minute, they're European funded, the teams are in place. We can put courses on very quickly if there's a specific urgent need on pre-employment. And on the ACL side, as soon as we've got centre accreditation and we know that there are tutors available, we'll be able to do the same there as well.
Are you happy on that?
Yeah.
Okay. My now is question 10, and it relates to paragraph 2.5.1. How much scope do we actually have to priority setting programmes, and what would you change if you could?
We have full scope in terms of the lifestyle curriculum element. That's entirely within our gift to design that up, but it's got to be market-led. And it would be very difficult for us to put on courses that we felt were going to achieve something if they weren't able to recruit the number of people to make it a viable course to deliver. So one of the big constraints for us there is there enough demand in the marketplace from potential learners to take up those courses. On the Skills for Work, the Essential Skills curriculum, we have flexibility over the proportion of courses that we allocate to a certain priority within Essential Skills. So we could allocate more to IT digital rather than communication. We could allocate more to courses for English speakers of other languages than application of November, for example. So we've got the flexibility to balance between that, but those priorities around it has to be one of the essential skills are set in stone if we're going to use the allocations we get from Coleg Gwent and Welsh Government to deliver it. In terms of where we'd like it to go, and you can come in as well because I'm sure I know you've got ideas around this, but the full cost curriculum is a priority area for us in terms of expanding that. Partly because it helps to deliver one of the corporate plan objectives around supporting vulnerable people, and that providing a social environment for people to interact is really important to the service, and that the team's really keen to keep delivering that element of it. But the other reason is that it provides an opportunity for people to start to embrace and fall in love with learning again, and that then gives us a hook to be able to push people on to essential skills courses, apprenticeships and the other training routes that we've got. So whilst quite often it may not seem like that in terms of the nature and the name of some of the courses that we're putting on, that's exactly what we're trying to achieve with it, and that's something I feel quite strongly that I would like to see increase.
And for us, one of the things that we're doing at the moment within the service is doing a scoping exercise of, yes, we've got 3 adult and community learning venues that we can deliver from, but we need to be better at what other community buildings are tucked away in communities. So we're trying to see what other little nooks and crannies are available as you come down the valley, to see where we can actually approach communities and take the curriculum so that we can actually target more people and increase our offer, whether that is full cost and taking a floristry class into Abersycon or into Blaenavon. But it will boil down to the venue. Is the venue suitable? Are our tutors willing to travel? But first we need to find those venues that we don't know of at the moment, whether that's community venues, the schools offer, and whether we can actually get those venues for a reduced rate, because obviously within our ACL service the cost of the learner is £4.25, and because all the resources and the overheads are met within our budget, the running costs. But if we go to a community venue, they may then charge us, which obviously we would have to either pick up within the service, or the cost would then have to be met by the learner, which increases the cost, which is the one thing we want to try and reduce. But it is something that we're keen to do now over the next 6 months, is do a very big scoping exercise of what facilities have we got available to us and the cost of those venues. So if you know of any, please let me know.
It's on that element of it, I just want to point out there is no budget allocation for venue bookings because we've got those 3 centres. So we'd have to either see additional resources coming in, or we'd have to reallocate resources away from some of the other elements that we're delivering in order to do that.
Faye wants to come in.
I've got questions along those lines I was going to ask you later. If I could just go into one though, sort of it's a little bit of blue sky thinking, but I think what we miss in many different areas of our community are things like family centres, which could be part of the school building. Is there any way you can use schools, or because they've now been managed in such a different way and because of safeguarding, is that impossible?
No, I don't think it's impossible. I mean, our family learning offer that we've got within Torfaen, we offer that to every school within Torfaen. But the uptake isn't great, to be honest. We've got some schools who are extremely proactive, and we go there year on year and year on year. But there are some schools, and we do that linking with the education service, because what we're prioritising is literacy and numeracy. We go to the education service and say, right, which schools do you actually want us to proactively target a bit more, because they've got literacy and numeracy issues within the school anyway. So we do try and target those, but we blanket approach all of the schools within Torfaen. So we do activity within the schools. There is this safeguarding issue where there is a delay because some of our tutors are new to the service and they haven't got a DBS. Some come to the service with a DBS, but some of the schools obviously aren't particularly happy if we put in a tutor in there who hasn't got a DBS, which is completely understandable. Like I say, some schools are more amenable. We do a lot with Woodlands up in Thornhill. We've done stuff in Blaenavon, with the school in Blaenavon. But that is something that we need to do. We could do more as long as the schools are open to us coming in. But some of the schools are stuck with space. They haven't got the capacity. Some schools, Garnteg, for example, are very, very proactive, but the parents just don't want to engage, which... Again, it's hard. We've got the provision there, but the parents just drop the children off and they don't want to engage with family learning. One thing that, we're trying to do is to get our offer right, I suppose, because if we try and target the parents with literacy or numeracy, it's kind of, I'm not interested, but what we're trying to do is to blend the learning into a different subject. So if we were to offer teaching assistance, for example, within a school, that would be free, and we blend the literacy and the numeracy in, so they don't really know that we're addressing their literacy and numeracy, but we're engaging them. So that's something that we're looking to do in the future. We've done it very well with beauty in the past, with Bronavon, in terms of our partnership working. We integrated literacy and numeracy into a beauty OCN. The uptake was really, really good. So I think we need to move away from the traditional literacy numeracy branding and make it more attractive to engage parents to come in. So that's something that we'll definitely be taking forward.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I think that's brilliant. I just know that out there are some families who are very, very hard to reach because they feel all sorts of problems and they're too entrenched to ever come out. I just wondered if there was more work done, not just with schools, but with social services, and if there were more family centre type places around schools where that would help. But I suppose that's a huge change in this authority from where we are, and I know we do this quite well, really. So it's just my thought.
There is, and it's a group that Angela runs, there's a wider economic inactivity group that has partners from a whole host of support services and support agencies on there. And that group's been very good at coordinating and designing provision to try and bring in some of the clients that social services may be working with, that family services may be working with, that the youth service may be working with, and integrating with some of our other elements like our needs provision as well. So the Economic Inactivity Group does pull a lot of these strands together. I don't know actually if it's ever been taken to them that we could expand ACL provision into their premises, but it's certainly something we could look at.
We've done the Integrated Children's Centre in Hollybush, the ICC. We have done activity there in the past, not for a while, because I think their provision has changed so much over the years. When it used to be Sure Start, we used to do a lot of parenting courses and confidence building courses. We do have the referrals from them and from the health visitors, but I think some of them, like you say, are so entrenched with other issues that the learning side of it is like a vision for them, I suppose, and we're not necessarily a priority, but we do put especially the confidence building courses on. And when not Sure Start anymore, Flying Start, the parenting groups, it's my old head, they run parenting programs. They ask us to come in at the end of it. So when the group of mum and dads have had their parenting support, we then visit the last but one session, either employability or adult and community learning, as some kind of progression for them. So it is there, but probably not as good as it should be. So yeah, it's definitely an area we can look at, and with social services, I guess. Nick.
Just moving on from that, Chair, if you don't mind, I'll ask the next question. We speak quite a lot about the buildings and bits and pieces, but what sort of problems do you have recruiting the actual tutors themselves?
Not a huge. It depends. If somebody comes to us and wants quite an odd subject, we would go out and do a specific advert for it. So just to give you an example, it's not as an odd subject, but British Sign Language for us as a adult community learner is extremely popular. But our previous British Sign Language tutor resigned. So and we had a cohort of 16 learners, so we had to do a specific advert which went out through council's swoop and external with partners to actually recruit a specific BSL tutor, which we did successfully, thankfully. Digital literacy, literacy and communication, because we're part of the Gwent ACL service, we kind of share tutors as well for those subject areas. We do struggle at the moment with a guitar tutor, funnily enough. We could probably run 3 or 4 in a guitar for beginners classes, but we've only got 1 tutor. So, but we do active recruitment drives about 2 or 3 times a year. And it is word of mouth as well. We have some people who have been learners on classes who now to actually teach for us. And whilst they come to us with a very strong subject knowledge, and it's a hobby for them, I suppose, we want them to have that progression and that quality there as well. So as a service, we actually fund them to do a teaching qualification. But yeah, I think there are subject areas that we have lost tutors to, which we've probably struggled to recruit to. But I say, because we're part of an ACL service, if we can't find a tutor, we'll go and ask partners, and we kind of share them. ESOL has been a big problem for us in the past, but we now share tutors with Newport local authority, so they teach for Torfaen and they teach for Newport. But we've just had a new tutor come to us, so sushi is very popular at the moment. We could probably run 3 or 4 sushi workshops. So yeah, and what he can deliver is different. So like I say, our curriculum is growing, but I'm not going to lie, we have struggled sometimes, but we will go out and instead of just doing a blanket come and teach for us, we will do specific ones as well. A bit like manufacturing. If we need to go down the manufacturing route, we would do a specific advert for a person who's got that experience.
And we anticipate that may be a challenge in terms of manufacturing, because it's a challenge, to be honest, recruiting manufacturing tutors or lecturers at various levels. It's the same for MVQ level qualifications in the college. But this is why with the manufacturing element of skills development fund, we need to give it that detailed thought to make sure we're not duplicating provision and actually pulling tutor resources away from where they're delivering successful classes already until then.
So I assume, reading on from that you would go to the jobs fairs. You know, when we have the regional jobs fairs, you'll have a stand there to, firstly, to look for new learners, but also to look for new tutors, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of a 2-pronged approach. Adult and community learning will be there to recruit learners into the service, but also to speak to the people to find out if tutoring is something that they would be interested in. Yeah, like I say, we do. We haven't done it this year, but normally we have a tutor advert in our adult community learning brochure. We've had new tutor open evenings as well, which we had like 40 people come to, and then we take them through the council's recruitment process. Then, yeah, so we are quite proactive, I'd like to say.
Anybody else want to come in on that? Okay. We can move now to question 15. Sue, please.
Sorry, Chair. My question, 2.82. Independent living skills. Having looked through Appendix B, there seems very few courses that come under independent living skills. Can you expand on what the encompasses are with these courses are held?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part?
Independent living skills. Having looked through the Appendix B, what page are we on that? 15, wasn't it? Independent living skills. Having looked through Appendix B, there seems very few courses that come under the independent living skills. Can you expand on this and why, please?
Yes, so our ILS provision, independent living skills provision, is something that has been run within the council for many years. With that, we have the same people coming back, the same learners then, year after year after year. And what we're tending to find now is those learners that are coming back with the courses that we run through the essential skills. We the programme is through AGORID, so they're OCN qualifications, and what we were finding is the learners that were returning year on year, have been coming to us for 20 odd years, they'd all done all of the ILS OCN units that we could provide, so we had to reduce it slightly and make some of the ILS courses fee paying. So whilst they're not part of the ILS free provision, they now pay for the service instead. So if we would do an ILS cookery class, for example, but instead of it being free, because we didn't have a maths OCN unit for them to do because they'd already done it, we made those classes fee paying. So instead of them coming back and doing the life skills, they come back and they pay for it. So it's in a separate, the ILS provision is there, but they come and pay for it instead of accessing it through the franchise.
In terms of the numbers as well, all of the services that we do are demand-led. And so the number of courses will reflect the level of demand that the service is aware of. And so if there are people who haven't exhausted the essential skills modules, OCM modules that they could do, if they approach the ACL service and there's enough of them, we can look at integrating additional ILS courses into the franchise amount that we have. But at the minute, the provision that we've got in that table reflects the demand that the service sees coming through.
And there was also a reduction in the amount of ILS learners that were accessing the centre because their transport provision was removed from social services. So they weren't able to actually get to the centres. So we took the service out to, which was scope at the time. But this year we have made some introductions to the curriculum for ILS because we've got new learners as well who have come through. So previously they would have to pay to go to a pottery class. This year we're making ILS pottery free for them to come to. So we're trying to change the ILS provision that we've got as well.
So with the loss of the transport services, how many roughly have lost out on this?
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. I can check for you.
Anybody else want to come in on that? Right, so we're now going to question 16.
No, I think. 2.8.2. Wanted to know how you actually engage with Coleg Gwent before finalising the delivery plan. Because I understand you both bid for the same sort of money. Do you talk to each other to see which bits of the money you'll be bidding for?
The way that the franchise is allocated, Coleg Gwent get given the funding from Welsh Government. So it's all of the local authorities then that are bidding into Coleg Gwent essentially, or discussing with Coleg Gwent for that element of the franchise. The direct delivery grant we get from Welsh Government, as things stand at the minute, and it is under review as I say, but as things stand at the minute, that's for local authorities and providers to deliver rather than for Coleg Gwent. So there's no competition, if you like, between those two. The key element on the franchise is that we essentially get given an indicative allocation, and then we're asked to put forward a profile as to how we would hit that target, if you like, in terms of that cost package that they give us. So we'll then supply them with a list of the courses and our target numbers for each of those courses that we think we're going to be able to achieve. That's all costed against the side of it in terms of the amount of sort of learner units that they're willing to allocate us within the grant for that. That goes over to Coleg Gwent, and then there's a discussion with them. What's been really useful in terms of both the franchise and the direct delivery is that it's flexible throughout the year. So if we're finding we're not getting the learner numbers onto a course that we were anticipating, if we have issues with tutors, there's significant flexibility for us to be able to adjust that curriculum and say, okay, we're going to put on this course rather than that course now mid-year. So the relationship with Coleg Gwent is actually very good, coordinated through this wider Gwent partnership. They hold award ceremonies every year to bring learners together, as well as the tutors who are there, and as well as the management teams too. And we talk to Coleg Gwent on other things as well. So yeah, the relationship's quite strong with Coleg Gwent.
Anybody else want to come in? Right, we're going to question 17. Steve, please.
Yeah, this is paragraph 2.9.1. The service met the franchise learning programme value delivery target without spending the full budget allocated. What happened to the unspent budget, And what are the consequences for not spending the full budget allocation?
So, in terms of the amount of tutor time that we allocate, it's very difficult for us to be able to specifically separate out the Colin Grant money goes on to this element of it, the Welsh Government direct delivery goes on to this element of it, because the way that we build the budget is we essentially look at what the gaps are within that funding. So we have an income target to hit from full cost delivery, we have a franchise amount that we get told, we have a direct delivery grant amount that we get told, and there's a shortfall there. We then have to balance that in year, so it's about meeting pressures. If we don't spend any of the revenue support grant, then it's not spent, so it'll be used as part of the wider departmental budget. So yeah, that's how the budget is actually built, and that's how the money's allocated across the different ones. What we can't do is say that this element of funding pays for this building or for these tutors, because it's all built as one whole holistic unit.
My only concern by asking that question is, if we got a surplus over, is that going to affect us for the following year? You know, any Welsh fund, funding, they'll reduce our grants, or, that was my...
No. We're optimistic that we may see a further uplift in franchise amount this year. The key for us is the constraints that we've got in terms of the amount of curriculum that we can put on is the venue capacity that we've got, demand, and the tutors that we've got available. We're fairly confident there is demand, and that we can increase provision because that demand is out there, and we're fairly confident that within the constraints we've already talked about, we can recruit tutors to be able to deliver that. Where we face a challenge is the amount of venue space we physically have available to be able to put those courses on, which is why Angie's looking at this different model of taking provision out into the community, which will allow us to draw down more franchise. If we can't get that model to work, there will always be a ceiling on the amount of franchise that we can deliver.
Anybody else?
The franchise allocation that we get from a college is monitored by myself and by Colin Gwent on a monthly basis, so we get continuous reports. So if we didn't hit that franchise agreement, that franchise allocation, you're quite right, the college would claw the money back, so there is a financial risk there. But thankfully that's never happened. It won't happen, but it is monitored. But 9 times out of 10 the college will come and say, would you like some more franchise allocation, because they know that we've met our target.
Nick and then Faye, please.
Yeah, just leading on from that, if the main problem is the venue space, and you said earlier that there may be some questions raised with being able to fund additional venue space. If the franchise is working properly and there's money to be drawn down, if you can make a good case to say, look, all our venues are full, could that not be an argument then to use some of the franchise allocation to be able to rent or pay for additional space, and would that then solve the problem?
The challenge with the franchise payment is it's not calculated on an actual cost basis. So we wouldn't say to them, this is the full cost of delivering that service, will you cover that full cost? It's done on the basis of a sum that they would expect us to be able to deliver, so a number of classes they would expect us to be able to put on for a fixed amount of funding. At the minute, that's deliverable because of the budget that we've got available, which pays for the 3 venues, so there's budget lines in place for those. We'd have to go back to Colin Gwent and essentially ask for a special uplift to be able to pay for additional venues. It's a conversation we haven't had with them, and we can have with them. They may have to look at or consider that outside of the normal franchise arrangements.
Would economy of scale actually be able to reallocate budgets across a wider range of venues? Because obviously the more that you're putting on, then the more revenue that you're raising, and would the budget not then be there to be able to accommodate more venues?
This is exactly the piece of work that Angela and myself are going to be looking at. It's essentially running a business model for a different mechanism of delivery and finding out whether there is a gap. And if there is, that then forms the basis for the conversation we'd have with Colin Gwent around gap funding that element. But yeah, it may be the case that it does actually work on a financial basis without that. My suspicion, based on how the franchise currently works, is that there will be a shortfall.
Faye?
Yeah. Thinking about what you said earlier about looking for other venues, and then thinking about that bit of budget that you might have had, I was just thinking, would it be possible to sort of fund going into somewhere like Green Meadow Farm, which has lots of buildings and is a good community resource and would help in several ways? That's the first part of my question. The second part is there room in the budget to think of things a little bit different and have a very specialised engagement officer who could perhaps engage with social services education and engage with those perhaps elderly people or people in families who are very entrenched, who are hard to reach?
Just to pick up the first of those, if there's venues available, we're happy to consider any venues that are available. So any venues at all across the whole of the borough that are made available to us, we would consider, but we'd have to look at it from an adult and community learning perspective in terms of the delivery of that service and whether it works and there's demand for delivery of that service. In terms of the second half and the specialist engagement, a lot of that work is currently picked up by the employability team. And working through the Torvine Economic Inactivity Group, the partner networks. So, as an example, we have the housing associations represented on that economic activity group, and they do have specialist officers who can go in and do some of the more intensive one-on-one support work to get people who are at this stage pre-employment and possibly pre-ACL in terms of some of their willingness to engage with learning, to get them to the point where they can then take up a normal ACL course in the way that we deliver it. For us to look at bespoke courses or more intensive one-to-one support would be quite an expensive model for us to explore.
Sorry, I will say our marketing officer, she does do a lot of that, and we're doing a lot more work at the moment with the food banks. So we do have an outreach service within the food banks, either through adult and community learning, where they're dropping in up in Blaenavon and in Trefethin, and we put our information leaflets into the food parcels as well. So we are trying to reach those who are actually suffering from in-work poverty and are having to use those services, either through adult and community learning or through employability. And then, because the services are so linked now, there's whoever picks up the referral, whoever speaks to that person, will make sure that they go to the right person, the right project.
Can I just ask about the elderly within that?
We do some work. We've done some work with Janet up in Baker Street in Blaenavon. It hasn't been somewhere that we have been actively targeting, I guess. We do through Adult Learners Week, the care home that is in just within the grounds of Torvine Crossy Community Education Centre. We link with those, and some of those service users have come to Crossy during Adult Learners Week, which is a pot of money that we provide. Again, it is something that we can do, but it would be if we were to we'd run exercise groups, for example, in the settlement, but in the venue, we've got cardiac clubs in there as well for people who are got heart problems. It probably is something that we could do, but it would be on a full cost recovery model. So if we were to use our exercise tutor, for example, to go in and do the chair activities that we do within a care home, they would have to pay for it because we haven't got that facility to subsidise it. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. So Blaenavon perhaps would need to take an active role in that, because, for instance, in my area we have 4 older people's homes that could benefit from that sort of.
Yeah, I think it's something that we could definitely look at approaching them and going to them with a model of a cost model to say, if we bring this exercise tutor in to do some gentle exercise with the older persons within the home, I think it's something that we haven't done before. But yeah, I'm definitely willing to take that forward. Yeah.
Can I come in? This really relates to question 22, and you're answering the questions. How are we working with the social landlords? Because in Blaenavon you have Harvard Care as well. And I wonder if you could possibly link up with those, and perhaps we can talk later. Okay. Question 18 has already been answered by Angela. Are we looking for venues north? So we'll skip that one. We've gone to question 19. Steve?
Yep, this is paragraph 2.92 and 210.1. I'll ask it all, it'll be easier then. Housing TCBC staff as part of T22, is this long term? And there is currently no recharge for accommodation provided to health and social care as part of the T22 process. Why is this?
The decision, I believe, was taken corporately to look at moving health and social care staff into available premises, and at that point in time we did have premises available, we had a space available. The issue with our space within the ACL venues is that our use of them entirely depends on the size of our curriculum in that year. So if we've got a very buoyant curriculum because we've got high levels of franchise, then there is a higher space demand. In the years 14-15, say, where we had to scope back the size of the curriculum, that did lead to a reduction in the amount of space that we used. It's something that corporately the council it's not costing the council any more money in that sense. It's health and social care staff within the council who are accommodated within there. But yes, it does remove a space that the service, on a service level, could otherwise be using.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to come in on this last question? So next, it's question 20, please.
We've noticed that on 2.11.5, the table shows a significant increase in the total income at the power station, and we just wondered, is there any particular factors for this increase, and will it be maintained?
Yeah, I think we were looking at our breadth of provision that we had available and wanted to make sure that the service was represented in all of our communities, in all of the community centres that we have. So we did put more full cost courses on within the power station during that year. So more IT courses. We did have more essential skills provision there as well. Yeah.
I just ask, was there good uptake?
Yes. Our numbers that you can see, our performance numbers in terms of enrolment is increasing year on year. So whether from that is from the full cost provision or from our essential skills provision. So yeah, the power station, I think this is one of our newest buildings as well, and it's quite central. It's on a very good bus route that people find it quite amenable. It's a very, it's a very nice location as well. Yeah.
All I can say to that is brilliant because it's in my area.
That's why she's so passionate. Next question is coming from Sue. 21, please.
Thank you, Chair. 3.11. Has universal credit had an impact on people assessing ACL? Also, next year now, we will have 4,700 transition over onto UC. Have you noticed the demand within your services, especially the employment team, with people that's on universal credit?
Yeah, on both sides, I'd say. Not for our full cost provision, all of our essential skills curriculum is free anyway, but our direct grants, so some of the courses that we provide, GCSEs, for example, teaching assistants, they're actually subsidised, so there are concessions in place, and some of those are for people on universal credit. In terms of employability, massively, yeah. We're seeing some people who are obviously quite vulnerable, unable to make a claim for universal credit, so that's something that we're supporting them with, either in terms of digital within our centres, as part of the Welfare Reform Project group that I'm part of as well. We offer all of the IT facilities in all of our ACL centres for people to come in and start the universal credit claim. If they haven't got access to it, we'll help people update their journals. But as part of one of our employability projects, for Bridges into Work, which is another area that I manage, those people are on universal credit. Obviously, a lot of people are now that have migrated over. We see people on working skills for adults, and the new NET project that we've got within ACL and employability are suffering from in-work poverty and are on universal credit, so we are supporting a high volume of those residents, yeah, unfortunately.
I won't dwell on this because I know we've got another committee meeting specifically on employability, but what the employability team tries to do is take someone from the point where they're pre-employment and they first approach the service without knowing necessarily what they want to do or how to do it, and take them all the way through their transition into employment and then transition into increasingly better paid employment. So that's what the employability service is aiming to achieve. And services like ACL will dip in and out at various points of that journey. So whereas a person may be progressing from one ACL course to another, quite often I believe there's a lot of employability support that's doing that hand-holding journey to get them moving through that learning. So all of the services that come within Angela's area and increasingly within my area are all interconnected, so that we're guiding individuals through that journey. But we can talk about that element of it and how universal credit affects that on the employability. Yeah.
So, universal credit and through ACL, we've been working with the financial inclusion team and the council's revs and benefits team as well to put specific courses on. Agorid OCN have written specific OCN units for personal budgeting for universal credit and IT digital skills for universal credit. So we actively put those on through adult and community learning to enable people like the financial inclusion team within Communities for Work and the council's revenue and benefits team to actually refer people to us to come and get that support. We've done it out in the communities. The uptake hasn't been brilliant, but we have put that provision on for people specific, that is specific for universal credit people as well. Yeah. Okay.
I'm just thinking that means, thank you, that means that probably as far as leisure activities goes, there's a whole tranche of people on universal credit and similar who are out of it completely because they just wouldn't be able to afford it. So we've made two-tier citizen sort of area, haven't we, with it, which is diabolical.
I'm sure we'd all like to go into that, but I don't think this is the right time to do it. So can we invite Nick to do 23 and 24? Sure.
Actually, it's a bit of a pleasure to ask this question, actually. Bit of a tip when you write these reports, especially with 3.2.8. This really should be in bold letters. I think you should be extremely proud of this. Adult community learning rewarded the best performing unitary authority. But you might expect us to ask the follow-up question to that, which is, is there anything within that? I'll get the wording of that. Are there still areas of further improvement? And if so, what? Look at a rest in your laurels, I know that. From this morning, I can see that, but we would like to ask anyway.
Absolutely. I think this is entirely credit to Angela and her team, because it's the team that have pulled this together. And I think what we've hopefully demonstrated, and Angela's hopefully demonstrated, is that the team are very, very self-critical all the way through to make sure that they're constantly improving performance and constantly embracing new ideas and areas for change. And I think for me, that's what was key in terms of that best performing unitary authority element of it, is that we've not sat back and worried about what's going to happen in terms of changes to franchise. We've proactively gone to Coleg Went and said, while others are cutting back, we will have more, we will do more for you. And that's something that the team can and be really proud of. In terms of areas for improvement going forward, marketing is certainly one that we're really focusing on. Intelligence and data gathering is another area that we're really focusing on. Expansion of the lifestyle provision and looking at where the gaps are in terms of our provision across the borough is another area we're really focusing on, and they're key priorities for us. We also will have to look at the model that we use for financing. The budgets are always under scrutiny, and rightly so. So we will constantly keep our budgets under review to make sure that we're delivering value for money and do what we can to make sure those budgets are being focused on tutors, learning provision. And the big change that happened in 14-15 to reduce management structures has left us with a very lean management structure there. So it's making sure that we can continue to deliver the service with that structure in place.
Anybody else want to come in? Okay. Our next question.
I've covered that one as well.
Yes.
Next paragraph, 3.2.9, upskilling in target sectors. I just wanted a little bit more comment, around this. We've got 42 employed learners and 26 learners who are unemployed. We'd like to make some comment on their outcomes. I mean, have they now gone on to better jobs, or have any of the 26 actually managed to find employment? Do we keep tabs on what's happened to these people?
I'll be honest, I don't have the exact tracking data for those individuals today. If they've received employability support, then we will have been able to track that process. If they came to ACL outside of the employability network and have moved on, the only data that we'll have is that end of course work that we've done with them. It is a gap in terms of intelligence and data for us, and it's a gap that we're quite keen to work with industry on, because, to be brutally honest, for us there's an incentive to keep track of where learners have gone post ACL, because we can then pick them up through working skills and other programmes and actually improve their income levels once they're into employment. So on those individuals, I don't have the data. If it was employability, I'm sure we can get it if they were supported through that.
I mean, there's two things for that, because obviously if they then go on to have more in the way of income, there's other courses that may be able to afford, so that might be a good income stream for you. And likewise, if these learners have gone on into employment, that once again might be beneficial for your service. But I was thinking more on the lines that if we are going to be going to funding streams, especially to employers, employers will want to see success rates, and they'll want to see, well, if we help you with this on a financial basis, what's the likely outcome of the money that we're inputting? Because they like to see a direct correlation. And it may be that if you had some of these figures to hand, that even if going back to Coleg Gwent, you could show we want some more money to do this because this is what we can do with these people and these are the benefits that can go forward. It might be, a useful bit of management data to be able to help you with your funding streams in the future, maybe.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and definitely something we'd be keen to start collating.
Anybody else want to make any comment? Okay, Steve, we'll leave you on to questions 5 and 6, please.
Right.
20.
The main change is the change in the direct delivery grant. That at the minute is around about the £90,000 a year mark. It's a small proportion relative to the other funding streams of the service, but it's an important one. We're still talking a fairly reasonable element there. Timescale wise, the latest intelligence coming through from Welsh Government is at some point within the next 5 years that they'll actually implement this change. They're certainly looking at 12 to 18 months of engagement and consultation purely in the design of what a new service could look like before they then look at any tendering processes that they may have to go through or direct award as well. That's going to be a further 12 months. So realistically, we've got at least 2 to 3 years before any changes, more than likely up to 5 years. So we've got some time to plan, which is really good. In terms of the impact that it will reduce the amount of essential skills we're able to deliver unless we can see a subsequent uplift in the amount of franchise that we receive. And that's one of the reasons we've been so keen to engage with Coleg Gwent to draw down additional franchise, is in the anticipation that if that funding goes, that's another good source of funding for us. And we've got the learners out there, we know we've got the learners out there to be able to meet that demand. It's also part of the logic as to why we're looking to extend the full cost curriculum as well, which brings in additional income into the service. So in terms of impact, it's something that will have an impact. We're mitigating it as best we can at the minute. It's always going to be a delicate balance for us. We don't want to draw down too much franchise funding to the point where we can't deliver and end up with a reputation that we're not able to deliver that franchise. So it's always going to be a bit of a balancing act. And while that funding's there, I wouldn't want to draw down more, but significant amounts more franchise. But it should be a fairly easy switch once we've got to that point.
Do you want to come in and make any comments?
No, I think, yeah.
Okay. And going on to question 27. Have we identified the underrepresented communities, and have we identified the barriers which are preventing them getting engaged with ACL? We have identified it briefly, as transport being one of them, but if you could give us some input on the underrepresented communities, I would be grateful.
So this is a lot of the work that the employability team and Communities for Work teams look at in terms of their employability support within both of those areas. They are aware of some of the barriers that people are facing. Like you say, transport is a big one. When it comes to the full cost course, obviously ability to pay will be an element that comes into consideration. Time is another big one. Quite often one of the things that we find anecdotally from speaking to people is that they either don't have or don't feel able to prioritise the time for formal learning in these types of environments. And just to pick up on how we're trying to address those, as Angela says, blending courses so that it doesn't seem like you're going to night school in a traditional sense. It seems like you're going to do an engagement activity is the key way we're looking to achieve that. The employability support to walk people through, okay, well, what are your individual barriers? Can we do anything to address that? It is another key area that we're looking to tackle, particularly around some of the transport issues that we've got there. And obviously looking at increasing the amount of service provision out in the community, if there's a viable business model for doing that, would be another way of us addressing that too. Demographics-wise, it would be a new exercise for us to go through our learners and find out their entire demographic characteristics against them. But it would be a worthwhile exercise for us to do, to find out if there's any particular characteristics that people have that aren't engaging with the service, and we haven't done that yet.
In terms of the actual communities themselves, one thing that we are trying to do with the database that we've got within Adult and Community Learning and the data that we've got available to us is with a colleague of who actually writes the reports for our database, is to use the people's postcodes or the ward to see, and then use that against looking at the data to see if there's any wards that are not being represented or there's not many enrolments from particular wards, and then that'll help us plan our outreach, our assertive outreach. So if we know that there's not many people in Aberystwyth, for example, then we know that we need to do a lot more work within that area. But that's quite in its infancy at the moment, because we need to make sure that the data that we've got within our database matches the ward data, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Steve.
On the comment you just said then, are we looking particularly in wards, particularly with deprivation? Because there's quite a few throughout the borough. I didn't know whether, sort of looking to target them, because they're the ones that probably need more support than most.
I think we need to work through a proper business model around it, to be honest, looking at exactly where we can target. You're exactly right that the wards that have higher levels of deprivation are likely to be the ones with more barriers where we need to do it. But I think we'd want to look at the statistical data around gaps first before sort of putting something concrete forward.
Obviously, most councillors have got wards which they really feel really need targeting. Are you willing to work with the ward councillors to identify these specific areas?
More than happy to work with ward councillors if ward councillors want to engage with us, but what we couldn't do at this stage is promise provision in every area. So if it gets to the point where there isn't a viable business model that we can deliver within the budget that we've got available, I think we need to take a policy steer in terms of what the direction is on that, and that's what we do anyway. We design up a potential service and we put it through the normal policy development framework. But in terms of consultation and engagement and the justification that members feel that their areas have, more than happy for members to speak to us to feed that into that process.
I think we'll be grateful for that, won't we?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Here's question 28. We now have an in-house carer service. Are we offering carers relevant training? We now have an in-house carer service. Do we offer carers training?
I don't believe the ACL service is specifically targeting carers, is that right?
We're working with the Council's Workforce Development team. We also work with social care and housing as well in terms of helping them with the recruitment of the care service. But through the Working Skills for Adults project that I also manage, we do, we as long as they're eligible for our provision, then we are able to offer them upskilling opportunities. We're doing a lot at the moment with Julie Hicks within the Council's HR service to offer council employees specifically the opportunity to come and speak to members of the Working Skills for Adults project, and for the new NET project that we've got, which is Nurture, Equip and Thrive. So we're doing a lot of in-house work at the moment, but we do work closely with the council's workforce development team in terms of recruitment and retention of care workers. Yes.
And outside of ACL and employability, Torvine Training also work in that arena, and they're part of an integrated work group that's looking at this. So what we're trying to make sure is that we don't have two elements of the same service or the same council that are competing for the same clients.
Right, we got some questions from Steve, Faye, and we'll take any other questions which do you...
Just wonder, do we work with neighbouring local authorities to provide courses, and would it be more cost effective?
So through the Gwent partnership, we do have the working arrangements in place to be able to do that. At the minute, we tend to share tutors. In terms of where our ACL centres are based, they're probably not close enough to another local authority boundary to draw up learners from that boundary, and likewise other local authority centres are probably too far away from ours. What we can do is an exercise to look at if any of our neighbouring authorities have ACL centres on our boundary, then that would be an opportunity for collaboration. But in terms of the centres that we've got, I believe they're too far away from those boundaries.
The reason I ask that question is sometimes we don't provide the skills within our borough, so therefore by collaborating we may be able to use that skill source.
Yeah, we like we say, because we're part of the Gwent ACL partnership, we have actually collaborated in terms of our awarding bodies. So we were asked in Torvine by a number of learners if we could deliver counselling courses. So we approached the awarding body, which was AIM, is the awarding body that delivers counselling qualifications. And it turned out that an Iron Leisure were actually, and they're part of the Gwent ACL partnership, in Blind Gwent, had the awarding body. So rather than us paying AIM to become another centre, we're actually a satellite centre now. So we have collaborated in that way. And the same with City and Guilds. Newport and Torvine have amalgamated their City and Guilds registration. So we do actually, Newport is probably on Monmouth, but Newport do actually send some of their learners up to Torvine and vice versa, because we have collaborated on two fronts in terms of our awarding bodies. And it was cost saving as well. Yeah.
Faye, do you want to come in, please?
Thinking of that on leisure services, it's my belief, I might have this wrong, but that Newport actually charges more than we do. And perhaps other authorities do as well. Will that be a problem?
I think now we're all charging the same. I think Torvine were probably higher in recent years. But as far as I know now, because of obviously part of the Gwent ACL partnership, and what we didn't want is for one local authority to be cheaper than the other, because then you're right, we would lose out. But the authority have taken the stance recently that they haven't increased the fees within adult and community learning, and now, from my understanding and from conversations I've had with colleagues, we all charge £4.25 an hour now for that reason.
But I think all authorities, as with us, will have to keep their business models under review. I think for us to sit here and tell you that they're all going to stay at that level, we simply don't know whether that's going to be the case going forward. What I would say on it is that any increases that us or other authorities are looking at would be tiny, very, very small, and it wouldn't be enough to justify a learner going additional miles in the car or on public transport to a different venue that's further away. So even if Newport or Caerphilly increased theirs, I don't think we'd see a big uplift in terms of the number of learners coming through to us, because the cost differentials are so small. I mean, you're talking about 10 to 15 pence, I would have thought, for an hour's course.
Okay, thank you.
Question 30, Faye, please.
Question 30 was going to be about the future, but I think we've talked through that and we've covered all of that. So I was just going to ask you one question I was going to ask you earlier, and that is, when you put on these courses, do you have crash facilities?
In the power station, yes. Historically, we used to have, when we had a lot of money, we used to have a mobile crash team, we used to have our own crash, but obviously with the funding cuts, that is something that has diminished. We haven't got our own crash, but in the power station, we've just supported Kilfmaith and Cwmbran to move into the power station. So it is a Welsh-speaking nursery. We're helping them at the moment with their registration as well, so that they can become full day care. So they offer a breakfast club and after-school club within in the centre. And one thing that we do say, especially for our essential skills learners, is if childcare is a barrier, we've got an arrangement with the Kilfmaith and Cwmbran. As long as they're operating, we will purchase a crash space for that individual. Yeah.
Thank you. And our last question comes from Nick.
There you are, last but not least. I'm going to actually add to this question just a little bit. In a lot of the presentation, what you've mentioned is that a lot of the ACL sort of drifts in and out of the boundaries of other services. And my question, or the question from the committee, was that are you confident that we're using the funding streams to the maximum benefit? Do you have also problems with being able to identify, well, this is mine and this is theirs, and does that sort of create problems with quite having the finger on the pie correctly to know what you're doing and what you're not, and whether if that makes a little bit of sense anyway as a question?
To be honest, one of the big advantages, and I'm sure she won't mind me saying it here, is that a lot of the services we've talked to you about today come within Angela's service area. So it would include all of the employability programmes, working skills for adults, bridges into work, net, as well as the ACL service. And having Ange in a position to manage all of those stops any sort of competition within those areas. There, I think it's safe to say, has been in the past competition between some of the other providers, particularly some of our work-based learning provision within the borough. But now that all of that has increasingly been brought together, we're not seeing that anymore. We're seeing a lot more collaboration, and the best working example of that is the health and social qualification. That providers have come together, even knowing that there's a commercial imperative for them to have a part of that pie, they've come together to design it up and allocate it in a way that works for the authority rather than for individual service areas. So much better than it has been in the past. I think in terms of broadening it out even wider then to look at some of the other providers, housing associations, other teams outside of my area within the council, mechanisms like TEAG, the Torfaen Economic Inactivity Group, are a really good way of us coordinating this provision. Because it's something that we've all seen as a priority that we're not duplicating in terms of the provision that we're offering. And where we both do offer a certain package, we know who our client base is compared to the others. So, for example, Communities for Work will only operate within the old Communities First areas, whereas certain parts of Angela's team on employability then won't operate within those areas because we don't want that competition for places. And the same goes for some of Bronhaven's support and Mellon Home support as well. So they, for example, will target their residents very closely. The Economic Inactivity Group then coordinates all of that provision. So there shouldn't be, and I believe there isn't, much in the way of competition going on at the minute. As resources dwindle, can I guarantee that that won't happen? No, but I think we've got robust mechanisms in place to try and control that.
The obvious question that follows from that is that we, if we just look at Torfaen's borough, the sort of things that we're doing, you've touched on very much on dwindling resources. Would there be a benefit of doing an exercise to see if maybe all of these bits and pieces could perhaps be brought under one roof? Especially as we've now got an award-winning, department that quite clearly can handle this. Would there be a better use of overall resources if an awful lot more of this came under one house and it could all be managed more effectively?
Quite possibly. There's been big strides towards that in terms of the creation of the service area that I head up, the Economy and Skills Service Area, because it's brought a lot of disparate functions together already. There are more that could be introduced into that framework. Yes, where we need to be careful is that some of those are being driven by other objectives as well. So it may be that some of them are a feeder into education's objectives, social care's objectives. So it depends on what the main driver is for that particular group. They may be intervening within the employability and skills marketplace, but to achieve an aim for their service area as well. So I would absolutely consider it, yeah, but I want to double check what the implications would be on any other service areas, and ultimately it's beyond my gift.
Anything quickly?
Just taking that further, I just wonder if certain parts are being done, say, by our housing providers or whatever, do we know that they're providing such a good service as we are and they're reaching all the areas you need to reach?
We don't monitor their services in the same way that we would ours. So I couldn't categorically say that they're providing the same level of services as, because we don't have the same level of data to be able to monitor it. Anecdotally, and the experience we get is that there is a good service being provided by everyone who represents T. And if there were any major issues coming up, they would be discussed and debated within the economic and activity group. And we're not getting a general feeling that there's any providers who are not performing within that arena.
Thank you.
Any questions from you, Sue, or anything?
I'd just like to say thanks for this morning, and also I am aware of the groundwork that you do, especially with the employability team, the financial inclusion team. I am aware of these, how they're out in the community, how they're working ground level, and I'm also aware of the amount of those that's claiming UC and the difficulties it has. But there again, we are lucky that you're all working together, especially with the financial team that picks up additional needs where support can be put in place. I'm just afraid now, come after Christmas, January, February, whenever the DWP decides for the transition to take place, that we've got 4,700 that's going to be transfitted over. So if I can help in any way or shape or form, please call on me. Thank you.
Just to thank you both for attending the meeting this morning and being very patient and tolerant and answering all our questions. On behalf of the committee, we wish to thank you for your achievements as the Best Unity Authority and congratulate Angela on taking up the challenge and the work she's doing within the community. I'm sure we all endorse that, and we hope that we can move progress and endorse Sue's comments that if you need anything that we can do to help, we're here. So thank you very much for your time, and we're probably going to have a welcome cup of tea now.
Thank you.
What we are supposed to be here for through the scrutiny activities. We have to reflect on the funding streams and priorities for adult and community learning provision, which we have. We need to determine whether the priority setting process is robust, effective and sustainable. And we need to find out if the impact of the service on any areas require greater priority and further development. So we now need to formulate some recommendations, and I'm going to hand you over to Rebecca to lead us forward.
Thank you, Chair. So, members, do you have any recommendations you'd like to put forward before I... Yeah?
Please, one go.
Because we're one of the best authority lead on this, I think we should make sure that, we're more proactive to stay where we are and not fall behind any of the others.
Yeah.
We're doing such a tremendous job. So.
We heard that the provision is widespread, but we are aware that there are barriers affecting people coming and taking part in these ACL groups. And I think transport needs to be addressed because we again are going to hit total isolation.
Can I just say on that point of barriers, could we put in there something that they did touch on, and that is about the need to sort of look at deprivation and how we reach with other agencies those people who need to be reached the most and where there is the most need, if it could be targeted.
Yes, thank you, members. I did have that down as one of your recommendations, that a greater priority be placed on identifying underrepresented communities within the borough and also identifying the barriers to people in those areas accessing adult and community learning. Did you have anything else before I raise some other points that you thought?
I do think that we're still not targeting the older people because whilst they're cost effective and courses have to be paid in full, people on low incomes are on pensions and pension credits are not becoming able to take part in any of the activities. And that again is affecting our well-being because it's isolation and loneliness.
Shall I come in on that? Yeah. We could bring that up under the marketing. Are they marketing and targeting people who are vulnerable, who are elderly, who are on low income? They said they've got to increase their marketability. Will they be doing that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Aaron. So I also had that one about the marketing, so I'll expand on that with what you've just said. Also, there was the, you mentioned, and officers sort of elaborated on it, but also working to find venues in communities to speed up that scoping exercise. And also you mentioned approaching housing associations and care homes to look at a costing exercise to see if there is any sort of potential for bringing those costs down to provide adult community learning in those sort of environments.
I also think that we have to put an emphasis, as Nick forward, of working with companies for the provision. We're relying on funding, but I'm sure there are some of the big companies around, even like British Aerospace as an example, who are willing to put some sponsorship money or some funding up, because I agree with what Steve says. Happy employees with a happy environment comes from a happy home environment as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And in addition to what you've said with regards to the social element and working with industries and companies, there was also the point about working with them with regards to tracking progress and data on how many move on into employment with those. And I think that was about all that I had down, unless you've got anything.
It was just that bit about the crash. It only seems to be the power station that has Mithrin, and as much as Mithrin is very good, perhaps for some families, perhaps from England, that might be a bit difficult. And also, could we just expand the crash, out further to other areas and other venues?
So if I pop the recommendation that they explore the potential for expanding on that, because obviously they did say that due to budget pressures it cut, but perhaps they could revisit that and have a look.
And did you mention about a yearly target, an annual review, or are we anything on that? Performance. Are you looking at anything with performance target annually to see whether what they're implementing is working on efficiency scales?
Well, obviously they've got their performance data that they're monitoring against, but obviously towards the end of the scrutiny cycle, you will obviously receive your update on recommendation report. So all the recommendations that you've made, you will be able to assess whether they've implemented those recommendations, or if they haven't, why they haven't. And also then you'll have another version in exercise next year. So if you do want to revisit this again, that is always a possibility.
Because with any funding issues, particularly Welsh Government, there could be implications with less funding or, stuff.
And as we always say, the work programme is always flexible. Should there ever be a major issue like that, then we could bring that as an emergency item for you.
But one thing does come to mind, and I'm not quite sure how to frame it as a recommendation. We did have a conversation around the economy of scale, the possibility to upscale this, and therefore to be able to draw down more funding and use that as a way to fund the venues that we might need around the communities. It might be worth talking to community councils to see if they have any facilities or any budgets with regards to this.
Yeah, you'll probably tell you with some of them, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know what everybody else thinks, but I think that they should be targeting bringing everything under one roof. It'll make it easier for everybody to access the services, bring it all under one umbrella.
But have we got anything about the users using this? The follow-up with this?
She did say that they do a survey, they do a questionnaire and they do monitor that. So
Yeah, but I do the questionnaire, but would that be in a process of coming back to us to say, well, this is what the users enjoyed, this is what, to see the services,
I mean, more as an action point rather than a recommendation. If you do want that information, she said she's happy to provide that to you. If you want me to note that down and ask that when they do that data trawl that they can provide you with a...
I agree about what you said about one umbrella. The only thing is I wouldn't want it to become like a silo. And also I think, the expertise from other areas and the crossover with social services, with education, with health is huge, and perhaps we should be doing more multi-agency work in some ways. Sue, anything?
Just going back to...
So another recommendations you'll be able to about that.
Okay.
Just one thing. Did we cover the point when we were looking at the learners and the outcomes? Have we got a recommendation with that they actually follow through the outcomes? Have we got something on that?
And part of that, they said, if you remember, about working with industries, because that is a gap at the moment that they don't track when they go out, that relationship with industries and companies, whether they've gone on to work with those. He could keep track of those that stay on courses. But
That's great, thank you.
Yes, sir. Just coming in my head. Well, they say in working with the older generation within Bronhaven and Mellon, there are other homes that are private. Could we incorporate that in there, not just in the RCL?
Okay, thank you. So obviously I will write those up for you and circulate those for your approval before they're finalised and sent on to the executive member. Thank you.
So our next meeting is scheduled for the 27th of November, and I'm going to ask Rebecca to give us some idea of the proposed items for our next meeting.
Thank you, Chair. If you recall from the visioning session that was held back in June, there were two items that were selected that were timely for November time. It was employability, which feeds on a lot from what you've discussed today, and also needs was another item that were both timed for those. I spoke to Dave prior to the meeting. He said that both are still timely, so members, it's up to you if you'd like to select which of those items you'd like to take. I will, though, just draw your attention. There is another item that is emerging. You did pick it at visioning, but no sort of set timeline was given for it, which was Springboard 2. That may be going to Cabinet this side of Christmas, so I don't know how you feel, whether you want to pick one of those two items and stick with those, or whether you want me to have further discussions with Dave after the meeting to see the timing of that Springboard report going to Cabinet. So ideally you could look at it before it goes to Cabinet. It's up to you.
I'm passionate about needs.
Yeah.
I'm not actually sure.
If you're ready for it, yes.
Yeah. I'm absolutely not sure what Springboard 2 is. Is that bad? I mean,
So if I just give you a recap on the Springboard. Springboard 2 was identified as a priority regeneration project in the Cabinet report in September 2018. And since this report, officers have been working with Welsh Government on a business case for Welsh Government funding. As part of that proposal, Torfaen Council are likely to be required to operate the Springboard 2 Centre as a grow-on space, particularly to accommodate businesses who have grown too large for the Springboard incubator. This has resulted in a good opportunity to review the relationship between Springboard and Springboard 2 and their role in stimulating innovation in Torfaen.
Wouldn't that come under the Cardiff B thing? Each of the one.
I think if they're ready to give us information on NEAT, that I propose we go for NEAT for the next meeting. Anybody happy with that? Anybody?
I will speak to Dave and Rachel after the meeting and I'll pin down exactly what it is that is going forward as part of that for the Cabinet report now. I'll get back to you. It may be that if it is urgent and it is big, then we could take it as a special meeting. You might have to pull in another meeting and we can look at that.
I mean, NEAT will be there. Rebecca, find out information. If she thinks the Springboard 2 needs to be just sooner, I propose Rebecca to give us and say, well, change your plan. We can do NEAT as an emergency meeting or as an extra meeting after. Is that okay? Yeah. Is that okay with everyone? Yes, thank you for all attending. And look forward to seeing you for our pre-agenda meeting later, beginning of November. Okay, thank you.